How the universe's strongest army was crushed by humanity's most basic survival instincts. Part 1. The galactic threat emerges. The Kronax Empire did not become the universe's most feared military force by accident. No, they achieved this status through meticulous planning, ruthless execution, and an evolutionary advantage that made them the perfect conquering species. Their bodies, covered in crystalline exoskeletons that could deflect most projectile weapons, housed minds that operated with computer-like precision. Each Kronax soldier was linked to a hive intelligence that allowed for perfect battlefield coordination while maintaining individual tactical thinking. They were, by all objective measures, the perfect warriors. Target acquired. Planet designation Earth. Preliminary scans indicate habitable atmosphere, abundant water resources, diverse ecosystem, and a dominant bipedal species with rudimentary technology. Reported Scout Officer Kex Valen as the invisible Kronax scout ship completed its third orbit around the blue and green planet. Commander Drazkor, decorated veteran of 17 successful planetary conquests, didn't even bother to look up from his command console. Classification? A Class D7 Commander. They've achieved spaceflight but haven't established permanent colonies beyond their own moon. Capabilities present but limited. A global communication network in place but primitive. Military capabilities fragmented by geographical and ideological divisions. Drazkor made a sound that might have been a chuckle if Kronax physiology allowed for such expressions. Another D7. How quaint. Add it to the acquisition list, low priority. This dismissive cataloguing of Earth might have been the end of humanity's story, just another footnote in the ever-expanding Kronax Empire's conquest log. But fate, or perhaps the inherent unpredictability of the universe, had other plans. 6 standard cycles later, the Kronax High Command reviewed their expansion targets. Earth, initially designated as low priority, was suddenly bumped to the top of the list when long-range scans detected rare isotopes in its crust that were vital for the Empire's newest weapon system. To prepare the 84th Annihilation Fleet, ordered Emperor Zarkoth, this Earth will be our next acquisition. The Kronax Empire had conquered over 3,000 planets in the last millennium. Their method was as efficient as it was predictable: arrive, overwhelm, subjugate, extract resources, and move on. Some planets were completely stripped of life, others were preserved as agricultural worlds or military outposts, but all became part of the ever-growing empire. The Kronax understood fear. They weaponized it with devastating effectiveness. Most species surrendered after the first demonstration of Kronax military might, usually the vaporization of their largest city. Those who resisted rarely lasted more than a few rotations before their will to fight collapsed under the systematic destruction of their civilization. As the 84th Annihilation Fleet prepared for hyperspace jump, Intelligence Officer Vex Moran submitted his final report on Earth's defenses. Humans appear to have no unified planetary government or military. Their forces are divided into approximately 195 separate nation-states with varying levels of military capability. The most advanced human weapons include nuclear warheads, supersonic aircraft, and rudimentary energy weapons. Their space defenses are non-existent. Commander Drazkor, now assigned to lead the Earth invasion, reviewed the report with the same detached interest one might give to a mildly interesting scientific paper. But estimated conquest time, based on historical data from similar civilizations, complete planetary surrender within 3.7 standard rotations after initial demonstration of force. Drazkor nodded, his crystalline face plates shifting slightly to indicate satisfaction. To prepare the standard invasion protocol. We'll begin with a show of force over their largest population centers, followed by targeted strikes on military installations. Once their leadership structure collapses, we'll move to resource extraction. The fleet, consisting of 27 warships ranging from city-sized dreadnoughts to nimble atmospheric fighters, it jumped into hyperspace with the cold efficiency that had made the Kronax legendary. What the Kronax couldn't know was that they were about to face an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. An enemy that didn't follow the predictable patterns of fear and submission that had made the Kronax conquest strategy so effective. an enemy whose greatest strength lay in what the Kronax perceived as their greatest weaknesses. The scout ship's observations had captured the surface facts: Earth's technology levels, military capabilities, and political divisions. But they had missed something fundamental about the planet's dominant species, something that couldn't be measured by scanning for weapons or analyzing communication patterns. The Kronax had dismissed humans as a non-threat based on their technological inferiority and lack of unified planetary defense. They had categorized Earth as just another Class D7 planet, ripe for conquest and exploitation. It would be the greatest miscalculation in the history of the Kronax Empire. As the invasion fleet dropped out of hyperspace in Earth's orbit, Commander Drazkor looked down at the blue planet with the casual arrogance of a conqueror who had never known defeat. "Begin the standard invasion protocol," he ordered. "Let's get this over with quickly. I have a vacation scheduled on Centauri Prime next month." The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. Humanity's first indication that something was very wrong came when every digital screen on Earth simultaneously displayed the same message: "Attention inferior species. Your planet is now property of the Kronax Empire. Resistance is discouraged." Discouraged. Jack Murphy, a 30-something New York City sanitation worker, squinted at his phone screen. Not even forbidden, just discouraged? Ah. He looked up from his phone to see a massive triangular shadow sliding across the Manhattan skyline. The ship was so large it seemed to defy physics, yet it moved with eerie silence. Similar scenes were unfolding in Beijing, Moscow, London, and every major city around the globe. Commander Drazkor's voice echoed through Earth's communication networks. "To demonstrate our power and encourage your swift surrender, we will now eliminate your largest military installation." 17 seconds later, the United States' largest naval base in Norfolk, Virginia, vanished in a flash of purple light. No explosion, no debris, just gone, replaced by a perfectly circular crater that extended a mile into the Earth's crust. "Shock and awe," mumbled Dr. Eliza Voss, Pentagon xenobiologist, as she watched the satellite footage. A classic invasion strategy. She turned to the roomful of ashen-faced military officers. "They're expecting us to panic." Captain Miguel Rodriguez, hastily appointed to the emergency response team, leaned forward. "And are we going to panic?" Eliza smiled grimly. "Oh, absolutely, but not in the way they're expecting." Around the world, humanity's reaction to the alien invasion was indeed one of panic, but panic in humans rarely manifested as simple surrender. Instead, it triggered a complex cascade of responses that had been hardwired into the human brain since the species' earliest days of evolution. While the Kronax expected organized military resistance, what they got was something far more chaotic and unpredictable. "Commander, the humans are evacuating cities," reported Tactical Officer Nex Vorath, confusion evident in his normally monotone voice. Drazkor's crystalline faceplates shifted in what passed for a frown. Expected behavior. "They flee from superior force." "No, sir. They're not just fleeing. They're taking things with them. Food, water, weapons, but also pictures, decorative items, pets. And they're communicating constantly. Across all channels. The Kronax deployed their ground forces according to the standard invasion protocol: precision strikes on government buildings, military installations, and communication hubs. Their forces moved with mechanical efficiency, each soldier a perfect cog in a perfect machine. They expected to find cowering humans, ready to be herded into processing centers. Instead, they found emptiness. "Where are they?" Drazkor demanded, as reports came in of abandoned cities and deserted strategic locations. Jack Murphy, meanwhile, was throwing camping gear into his pickup truck. "Come on, Emma," he called to his golden retriever. "We're going to my buddy's cabin upstate." Across the country, millions of Americans were doing the same thing, heading to the woods, the mountains, the deserts, the places they knew, places the aliens didn't. In the Pentagon's rapidly relocating command center, now housed in a converted mine shaft in Colorado, Dr. Voss was explaining human psychology to a roomful of generals. The Kronax are hive-minded collectivists with perfect communication. They expect us to behave as a unified entity. But humans? We're messy, individualistic. When we panic, we don't just surrender, we fight, we flee, we hide, we adapt. Captain Rodriguez nodded. So our greatest weakness, our lack of unity, becomes our strength. Exactly, Eliza said. They can't predict what we'll do because we don't even know ourselves. As Drazkor's forces secured empty city after empty city, an uncomfortable realization began to dawn on the Kronax commander. This wasn't going according to plan. Find their leaders, he ordered. Capture their command structure. But Earth's command structure was already scattered across 1,000 hidden locations. And ordinary humans, driven by the most basic survival instincts, were about to teach the universe's greatest military force a lesson it would never forget. 3 days into the invasion, squad leader Mektoral led his unit through an abandoned suburban neighborhood in what humans called Ohio. His 12 soldiers moved with perfect synchronization, their crystalline armor gleaming under the Earth's sun. This is inefficient, Mektoral communicated through the hive link. The humans have scattered like vermin. How are we supposed to subjugate what we cannot find? His question was answered by a lawnmower blade that came spinning through the air, somehow finding the precise gap between his helmet and body armor. Mektoral dropped with a crystalline crack. The rest of his thought was cut short, as the remaining Kronax soldiers were ambushed from all sides by humans wielding an assortment of improvised weapons. Golf clubs, chainsaw parts, garden tools modified into spears. Halfway across the continent, Commander Drazkor received the unit's final transmission with disbelief. An elite Kronax squad taken down by gardening equipment? Impossible. Impossible. The recordings are clear, Commander, his lieutenant responded. The humans appear to be adapting ordinary tools as weapons. Drazkor's frustration manifested as a high-pitched resonance in his crystalline structure. They're supposed to be terrified, disorganized. How are they coordinating these attacks? The answer, of course, was that they weren't. At least not in the way the Kronax understood coordination. Jack Murphy had never planned to join a resistance. He'd just wanted to hide out at his friend's cabin until the alien invasion blew over, if it ever did. But when a Kronax patrol discovered their hideout, something primal awakened in him. "Emma, stay," he whispered to his golden retriever, who growled softly at the approaching aliens. Jack's hands closed around his hunting rifle. He wasn't a soldier. He'd never even been in a fight. But these crystalline invaders were threatening his dog, his friend, his planet. Something ancient and powerful surged through his body, adrenaline, cortisol, a cocktail of chemicals that humans had evolved over millions of years to deal with predators much bigger and stronger than themselves. The Kronax never stood a chance. In a Pentagon briefing room now relocated to an underground bunker, Dr. Eliza Voss was explaining the unexpected developments. The Kronax expected us to respond like their previous conquests with organized military resistance that they could systematically destroy. Instead, they're facing millions of independent resistance cells, each operating on completely different tactics. Captain Rodriguez studied the map showing Kronax casualties. They're taking losses everywhere. But how? Their technology is centuries beyond ours. Because they've never encountered a species quite like us, Eliza explained. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on the African savanna. We're hardwired to improvise, to use our environment, to outlast stronger predators. Meanwhile, food scarcity was driving even more innovation. In Minnesota, farmers were using their intimate knowledge of the land to ambush Kronax patrols in cornfields. In the Appalachians, generations of hunting expertise were being repurposed to track and trap alien soldiers. The humans' apparent lack of coordination was proving to be their greatest strength. There was no central command for the Kronax to target, no unified strategy to counter. Just millions of humans, each responding to the threat in their own way, using whatever tools and knowledge they had at hand. The commander reported Intelligence Officer Vex Moran. "We've lost contact with 27 more ground units, and our Psyche Assessment Division has identified a disturbing trend." Drazkor turned his crystalline gaze to the officer. "Explain." "The humans. They're not just fighting out of fear. They appear to be enjoying it. Some are even creating humorous content about the invasion and sharing it widely. On screens across the remaining human networks, memes about the Kronax were spreading faster than the invasion itself. Alien invasion? In this economy? Read one popular image. Another showed a Kronax soldier looking confused at a human wielding a baseball bat. That's not how war works. Welcome to Earth, buddy. Commander Drazkor stared at these incomprehensible human communications. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that responded to existential threat with jokes. This planet, he muttered, is fundamentally wrong. By the second week of the invasion, the Kronax Empire was experiencing something entirely new: failure. Their casualties mounted daily. Their supply lines were consistently disrupted, and their command structure was becoming increasingly disoriented. This is unprecedented, Drazkor raged to his war council. We've conquered species with technology far beyond these humans. How are they achieving this level of resistance? The answer came from an unexpected source, the Kronax's own scientific division. Chief Analyst Loxverin had been studying human physiology and behavior patterns. Commander, I believe I've identified the problem, Loxverin announced. Humans are inefficient. Drazkor's crystalline faceplates shifted in confusion. Explain. The Kronax evolved for optimal efficiency in all things. Our communication is perfect, our strategy is logical, our actions are coordinated. Humans are the opposite. They're messy, emotional, and wildly unpredictable. They make decisions based on gut feelings rather than logic. They form small, intensely loyal groups based on arbitrary factors. They will risk multiple lives to save a single individual. How is this inefficiency an advantage? Drazkor demanded. Because we cannot predict them, Loxverin replied simply. Our entire military strategy is based on predictable responses to superior force. Humans don't respond predictably to anything. Meanwhile, humanity's tribal instincts were leading to unprecedented global cooperation. Old enemies were putting aside differences to share tactics and resources. Information flowed freely across formerly impenetrable borders. In a makeshift command center in what used to be a high school gym, Captain Rodriguez was briefing soldiers from a dozen different countries. The Kronax armor has a weakness at the joint between the helmet and chest piece, he explained, pointing to a diagram. Their crystalline structure can't flex without creating a small gap. That's your target. A Russian Special Forces operator raised his hand. How did you discover this? Rodriguez grinned. A teenager in Nebraska figured it out while playing with his younger brother's rock collection. Turns out certain earth minerals can scratch their armor. The kid posted a video online, and within hours we had people worldwide testing different materials. This was the human advantage, distributed problem-solving on a planetary scale. No central command to disrupt, no single strategy to counter. Millions of human minds working independently on the same problem, sharing discoveries instantly across global networks. And then came the breakthrough. Jack Murphy, who had gone from sanitation worker to resistance leader in the span of 2 weeks, led a daring raid on a grounded Kronax shuttle. His team, a mix of hunters, mechanics, and one particularly resourceful high school chemistry teacher, managed to capture not just the shuttle, but a Kronax officer alive. You will extract nothing, the captured Kronax officer, Tex Callan, hissed through damaged vocal processors. Jack shrugged. We don't need to torture you, buddy. We just need to watch you. He turned to his team. Observe everything. How it moves, how it communicates, how it reacts. The chemistry teacher, MS Patel, was particularly fascinated by the Kronax's crystalline structure. It's like a semiconductor, she mused. I wonder if it responds to certain frequencies. She rigged up a modified speaker system and began testing different sound waves. At 27.4 kHz, the Kronax officer's entire body began to vibrate uncontrollably. Interesting, MS Patel said with a grin that would have terrified any of her students. The captured technology and the discovery of the Kronax's sensitivity to certain frequencies spread across human resistance networks like wildfire. Within days, humans worldwide were modifying speakers, radios, and even musical instruments into weapons. Aboard his command ship, Drazkor received increasingly alarming reports. Kronax ground forces were retreating from areas where humans had deployed what they called sonic weapons. Entire squads were being incapacitated by harmonics that caused their crystalline bodies to resonate painfully. "This is impossible," Drazkor muttered. "No species has ever reversed engineered our technology this quickly." But the humans weren't done yet. They were just getting started. 3 weeks into what was supposed to be a 3-day conquest, Commander Drazkor faced the unthinkable task of reporting failure to Emperor Zarkoth. "Esteemed Emperor," Drazkor began, his crystalline form vibrating with tension, "I regret to inform you that the Earth's subjugation has encountered complications." The Emperor's massive form filled the holographic display. "Complications? From a Class D7 species? Explain yourself, Commander." "The humans are different. They don't respond to standard conquest protocols. When we destroy their military bases, they fight with farming tools. When we jam their communications, they use primitive methods to share information. When we target their leaders, new ones emerge instantly." It's as if Drazkor hesitated, as if the entire species consists of nothing but leaders. The Emperor's crystalline face remained impassive. "You have the most advanced military force in the known universe at your disposal, Commander. Use it." Ew. But even as the communication ended, Drazkor knew that conventional military force wasn't working. The humans had already adapted to most Kronax weapons. They'd discovered that ordinary water, when pressurized sufficiently, could penetrate the microscopic gaps in Kronax armor. They'd realized that Kronax sensors could be fooled by the simplest of decoys. And most disturbingly, they'd begun to use psychological warfare. Dr. Eliza Voss had become the de facto head of Earth's psychological operations. The Kronax evolved as a hive mind, she explained to the United Nations Emergency Council. They value order, predictability, and efficiency above all else, so we give them the opposite. Operation Chaos was born. Across the globe, humans began acting in ways specifically designed to confuse and disorient the Kronax. Radio stations broadcast nonsensical messages filled with contradictions and impossible instructions. Resistance fighters would attack, and then immediately retreat for no apparent strategic reason. Decoy targets would be heavily defended, while valuable assets were left seemingly unprotected. Jack Murphy led one such mission in what had once been downtown Chicago. His team spent 3 days fortifying an empty warehouse, making it appear to contain something of immense value. When the Kronax inevitably attacked, they found nothing but a giant banner reading, "Guess again." The psychological impact was devastating. The Kronax, evolved for perfect logic and efficiency, were facing an enemy that seemed to operate on no logic at all. "They're irrational," Tactical Officer Nex Foroth reported. "They expend resources to defend worthless targets. They sacrifice tactical advantage for single individuals. They continue fighting when all logical analysis indicates they should surrender." But the humans weren't being irrational at all. They were operating on instincts far older than logic, the deep-seated survival drives that had kept their species alive through ice ages, plagues, and their own destructive tendencies. The final straw came when humans discovered the Kronax's fundamental psychological weakness, their inability to comprehend humor. M.S. Patel, the chemistry teacher who had discovered the Kronax sensitivity to specific frequencies, had another breakthrough. "They can't understand jokes," she told Jack during a strategy session. "Their hive mind is so literal, so logical, that humor actually causes them pain. It's like a cognitive dissonance they can't resolve." Yen. This discovery led to the strangest weapon in human history, weaponized comedy. Resistance fighters began broadcasting jokes, puns, and absurdist humor on frequencies the Kronax couldn't block. They painted nonsensical slogans on buildings targeted for Kronax occupation. They left paradoxical written instructions where Kronax soldiers would find them. The effect was immediate and devastating. Kronax units began to malfunction. their perfect coordination disrupted by cognitive processes that their crystalline brains couldn't reconcile. Some simply shut down, others began exhibiting erratic behavior. Commander Drazkor watched in horror as his perfect military machine began to unravel. "This planet is a disease," he hissed to his increasingly unstable command staff. "These humans aren't just enemies, they're a contagion of chaos." He didn't realize how right he was. Humanity's apparent weakness, their chaotic, emotional, unpredictable nature had become a virus that the perfectly ordered Kronax system couldn't fight. And the infection was spreading. 1 month after the Kronax invasion began, the unthinkable happened. The 84th Annihilation Fleet, pride of the Kronax Empire, undefeated conquerors of thousands of worlds, began to retreat. It started with isolated incidents, ground units abandoning their positions, shuttlecraft returning to orbit without orders, communication outposts going dark. Then entire battalions began withdrawing from human population centers. In the command ship orbiting Earth, Commander Drazkor was losing control, not just of the invasion, but of his own mind. "They laugh," he muttered, his crystalline structure emitting discordant tones that alarmed his officers. "They laugh at death. They laugh at fear. They laugh at us." His normally perfect posture had deteriorated. His movements were jerky and unpredictable. How do you conquer a species that turns everything, even their own defeat, into a joke? The answer, of course, was that you couldn't. The Kronax Empire had conquered thousands of logical, predictable species, but humanity's final defense wasn't their military technology or even their adaptability, it was their fundamental irrationality. Their stubborn refusal to behave as conquest protocol dictated. Jack Murphy, now recognized as one of Earth's most effective resistance leaders, stood in the United Nations emergency headquarters beneath the Swiss Alps. "We need to push our advantage," he urged the assembled representatives of humanity. "Not just drive them off Earth, but make sure they never come back." Dr. Elisa Voss nodded in agreement. "We've discovered their weakness. Now we need to exploit it fully." She brought up a display showing Kronax physiological data. "Their crystalline neural networks can't process paradoxes or absurdist humor. It's literally painful for them. I propose Operation Final Joke." The plan was audacious, borderline insane, and perfectly human. Using the captured Kronax communication technology, Earth would broadcast directly to the invasion fleet not threats or demands for surrender, but the most confusing, paradoxical, absurdist comedy that humanity had ever produced. Every comedian, comedy writer, and humorist on Earth contributed material. The broadcast began with classic Abbott and Costello routines, escalated to Monty Python sketches, then moved into stand-up comedy, internet memes, and finally, with paradoxical statements and koans designed specifically to short-circuit the Kronax logical processes. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The Kronax, unable to filter or block the transmission without cutting off their own vital communication network, they were bombarded with concepts their crystalline minds couldn't process. Their perfect coordination collapsed. Ships began colliding with each other. Some vessels fired on their own fleet. Others simply shut down all systems. Commander Drazkor, his mind fracturing under the assault of human illogic, made the only decision he could: full retreat. His final transmission to Emperor Zarkoth was almost unintelligible, filled with fragmented thoughts and mathematical impossibilities. The humans, they're not a civilization, they're a virus of chaos. They find humor in destruction, joy in disorder, cannot be conquered, cannot be understood. As the remains of the 84th Annihilation Fleet limped back into hyperspace, humanity erupted in celebration, and of course more jokes. T-shirts appeared overnight with slogans like "We made the universe's strongest army cry Uncle and Earth, undefeated intergalactic champions." 6 months later, the Galactic Council, an alliance of spacefaring civilizations that had long lived in fear of the Kronax Empire, sent their first diplomatic mission to Earth. Ambassador Zyle Van of the Meridian Collective addressed the United Nations. For a millennium, the Kronax have been the scourge of the galaxy. Thousands of worlds have fallen to them. None have successfully resisted until Earth. You have done what no other species could do. You broke their will to conquer. The galaxy owes you a debt of gratitude, and perhaps a certain degree of caution. Jack Murphy, Now Earth's representative to the Galactic Council grinned. Don't worry about us. We've got plenty to clean up here before we start thinking about galactic domination. But privately, the alien diplomats weren't so sure. They had reviewed the records of the Kronax invasion and Earth's response. They had seen how quickly humans had adapted to alien technology, how fiercely they had fought, how creatively they had exploited their enemies' weaknesses. They're dangerous, one diplomat whispered to another as they watched humans celebrating in the streets. Not because they're advanced or powerful, but because they're survivors. They turned their evolutionary weaknesses into strengths. As the alien diplomats departed, they couldn't help but notice a new billboard erected outside the United Nations building. It showed an image of Earth with a simple caption that made the aliens deeply uncomfortable. Welcome to Earth. Don't make us get creative.